For a lot of people, he needs no introduction. I've known of him for probably 30 odd years. I've known him personally for about 20 years in the aquatics trade, and as I've said before publicly, I've been lucky to interview him at his house several times and over several decades now. And the tank is always changing. It's always my favourite interview because it's the best tank I've ever seen in the flesh. And he's always got loads to say. He's very entertaining and a great host. So thanks for thanks for coming, because it's these things are getting rarer these days, aren't they? So right, let's begin. So there you are, David, Managing Director of DD, the Aquarium Solution. You class yourself as a reef gardener.
I have always regarded keeping an aquarium and aquascaping it as very similar to gardening.
Yeah.
Especially over the years as it's got more sophisticated. I would say there's a lot more knowledge, and we can put things in the tank where they should go and not where we like them to go.
Quite a technical garden though, isn't it?
It's become more and more technical. When I first began reef keeping, I was 28 years of age, and you were told to take the white skeleton corals out of the tank every 4 weeks.
The skeletons?
The skeletons.
Because they died?
Because they didn't have live ones then. And brush them in bleach to make sure they went back white again. So that we've advanced from that, so I would say quite a long way.
Okay, great. That's me, you know about me, I'm at Reef Builders, but I got to know David when I was at Practical Fish Keeping magazine. I actually used his products before I worked there, but we used to review products, and you were always a favourite in the magazine actually from the 90s onwards, and I got to interview you in the early noughties when your tank had T5, and you just moved to T5 from metal halide. So you were a bit of a T5 pioneer.
We were the first company with mixed colour T5 tubes in the world. I met the person who brought T5 tubes into the hobby. Princeton was his name, in Germany, but he had a blue or a white tube, and you had to have blue or a white tube. You could never mix the colours. We were the first company to put the blue and the white together, which made a tube called Aqua Blue, and that gave you more scope to have other colour tubes later on. So we introduced the T5 tubes, and everybody said you can't grow coral from them. As has most of the development of my life. I mean, from changing over to a calcium reactor many years ago, and adding hydroxide with it at the same time. Everybody said that won't work, and the calcium reactor was late on the scene, and everybody said the tank will fill without. And so, you know, there's always been people who've always said things don't work before they've tried them, and that's something that one comes across maybe even today, but not as much, because all the things that have happened have made it possible now to keep corals to a very high standard. And when I first started keeping corals in the tank, they were pretty well witch doctors that made the formulas to put in your tank, because they just thought of anything and hope to sell it to you. Well, those days are gone.
Yeah, so T5, you're the first one to pioneer just exclusive T5s for growing corals, but you proved that on your tank as well, which is 4 feet deep. Now, one of the things I think which is a credit to you is that you always test your products, and you've ran that tank in one form or another for kind of 40 odd years. So that's
maybe slightly less than 40 years.
Yeah, but
I'd run a fish tank for more.
Yeah.
Not that one.
Yeah.
Or one similar size to it. Yes.
And I've worked for lots of different aquatic companies since Practical Fish Keeping, and we all say we test products, but you have got the ultimate test tank in that, you know, you've got a large reef tank and a risky reef tank if you put a product on that doesn't work. So we hope that when you try out products, then it's got to work.
Well, there are two things about products. They not only do they have to work, but they have to stand in the handling of the marine keeper, because they're not everybody's very good at keeping things in one piece when they're handling equipment. They drop it, they do this, they do that with it. So it is important to have. I've had good hands-on experience with all the products really that we sold. I think every major product, and to this day I'm testing our competitors' products in my sunroom on the system to see how they perform, if they perform, and I don't release the results of that, except in the future we will be releasing some good information on the costs of running some of these things from different manufacturers, because we've done a lot on that work, and at the moment I've got a new type of heater which I'm testing, which cuts the electricity use down for heating. Now I don't know whether that's true. I'm told it is by them. They're a first-class company, and I have to prove it. So I'm just about to try one.
Is that Shago?
Yeah.
Very good. Titanium heaters from Germany.
Yeah.
Very good brand. I did see it. Yeah. So that's the thing with that heater. It's more energy efficient.
Yes.
So it's got a greater surface area.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, we'll talk about that in a bit. So why is this tank my most impressive tank that I've seen? Well, it's everything. It's the fact that, you know, you travel to London and it's an exclusive area of London, you live in Mayfair, and it's always a big event for me when I go. And as I walk through the door, the first view is actually the side view of your aquarium. But there's other things as well. Obviously you've got this lovely decorated apartment, but what people can't see, you've actually got a pond in the floor. Yeah. You've got an indoor pond.
Yes, I've got an indoor pond because I bought the flat next to mine, and the height was slightly different between the two flats. And where you cross over, I put a pond in which you don't notice the different height of the floors. Because it's a bridge going across it, and the bridge, you can't judge whether it's lower or higher.
Have you got fish in it?
Yes, goldfish.
Oh, okay.
Only goldfish.
Well,
not koi.
That brings me to my next slide, because that's how you started, isn't it, with goldfish? Yes. 70 years ago?
70 years ago.
Yeah.
I was 8.
That's right, isn't it? Yeah.
70 years ago.
Yeah.
Time goes very fast. Right. I always liked fish, and my parents bought me a little 2 goldfish and a small box aquarium. In those days there were metal frames on the outside and putty with glass, and they were my first experience with keeping fish. I then went on to tropicals when I was about 16 for quite some time, till about 22. Then I took a break from it because I moved, I got married, and then I went back with marine fish and corals. But corals mostly, because in those days corals were starting to show up, but anemones and corals are reasonably easy to keep. And I had several tanks in that learning about how to keep seawater corals. I think, and the first tank was in between I bought a new flat, and it was in between the bathroom and the bedroom as a wall, and it was very, very nice.
So I'm just jumping ahead, but this nice little anecdote you told me about, you needed to send the pipework through your neighbour's apartment, didn't you, or you wanted to, when you did your big tank? And what did he say? He said no. So what did you do?
He didn't want me to do it, so I rented the flat while I was doing the decorations, and I moved the walls slightly to be able to do it.
Didn't you end up buying it as well?
Yes, I bought. That's the flat I bought. Yes. But he didn't know I bought it.
Right, I see. It was all very sneaky to get your tank in. And just one thing about the room as well. What people can't see is just out of view is you have this antique aquarium.
Yes, it's a 1940s, 30s aquarium. The glass is new, but the frame is from that period. And it's really nice. I bought it in Antiques Fair in Logan House. Very, very beautiful tank.
Expensive?
Well, in those days, when I bought it, it was about 10 years, maybe 12 years ago, it was about £3,000. So it was expensive.
A lot of money.
But it was a really nice, it's really nice display.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, 70, just to recap, 70 years in fish keeping, started keeping marines in the 70s. I know you were doing it in 78.
Well, you go back 70 years from now, what year did you get to? Who's the mathematician here? None of them should be reef keepers, so they can't count. 1953.
That's 70 years when you started with goldfish.
Yes. And then the reef tank I started when I was 28.
28, 50 years ago.
And that's 50 years ago.
Yeah. That's a long time in reef keeping, 50 years.
Yes.
I've kept reefs for 20 or 25 years.
Yes.
50 years is a long time.
Yes.
The hobby's changed fundamentally in that time.
Completely, absolutely, and to the better. And so much more knowledge, as I say, and so many nice things.
And you started to get a lot of notoriety for your tank. Even in the 80s, I've managed to find this video on YouTube of yourself on Channel 4 TV in 1989 on a programme called Fish People. And you were on it, and Pete Waterman was on it, and all these people were on it. Did they approach you? Did they know about your tank, or did they approach a retailer in London? Or
I don't know how they found out. They approached me.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about the programme or anything until they approached me. So and they approached me. But that tank was very interesting because it was a tank where, at the time, there were no measurements for calcium. Salifert did not exist. Salifert calcium test kit. And there was no real way of checking anything but nitrates, because in the tropical fish they had nitrate tests and ammonia, but they were never accurate when they were turned into used for salt water. However, what I did is I had a large cupboard near the tank, and I had two water tanks where I constantly mixed up salt water and dripped it slowly into the tank day after day. And because every time we did a water change, everything looked better. So I thought I'd try and do a permanent one, but very slowly. And I couldn't measure any chemical, but the tank thrived. And one of the reasons I think was that the people who supplied me with the fish was the company down in London Airport, the Grand Cox company.
oh yeah, Waterlife.
Waterlife, where was the first one I went and bought the
well, he wrote books as well, didn't he, Graham Cox?
Sorry?
He wrote a book, or at least one book, yeah.
Well, it was at that point, I think, when he saw what I was doing, and one of his staff did, and they must have told this company, whoever made the Channel 4, to go and have a look at this tank. Yeah. Because everything thrived. I mean, you look at the video today, it's, you know, it's a tank of its time in the sense that the colours are growing, pulse corals pulsing, which was, that was new, pretty well. You know, the corals actually did very well. And I've never had to worry about tests because it was always new water going in.
And that was 34 years ago.
Yeah, and that's when I first had. In fact, it was I used to go to Germany because I was working in Germany, and I saw the first of the test kits from Salifert with calcium, and I recommended it to TMC, and they very kindly gave me one test kit after they started selling it. So that shows you how many years ago, and D&D didn't exist.
Yeah, and so, but your tank and you yourself have had notoriety in the hobby since then, so I just looked you up and, you know, obviously you were in practical fish keeping in the 1990s, that was the UK's biggest fish keeping magazine. You started the Aquarium Solution in the early 2000s?
Yes, it said 18 years ago, the company that we are now was the one that was D&D slightly earlier, but I was a 50% shareholder, and I wanted somebody else to join the company, and I split up with the other shareholder because he just wanted to take money.
What does DD stand for?
Well, at the time it was Deltec and David.
Deltec and
David?
David?
It was Daniel and David first of all, then Deltec and David.
I thought it was.
And then I took it away from Delta completely and sold out. And then Stuart came to join the company.
Okay.
And then we started.
Do you want to have a look at a flashback to the 1980s? Let's have a look.
This is
prime time television, reefing in 1981.
Yeah, this is the tank that with the dripping water. Now, none of those corals were surviving before this kid.
Square spot aquarius. You're just going to buy some today?
I know.
Get ready for the corny bit.
This film is about fish and the passion of people who keep fancy fish in aquariums. And from the thousands of different species, they've chosen fish that suit their personalities, finding a magic in keeping alive.
Hard coral.
Sometimes breeding them in their front room. There are in Britain 5 million fish people. So what is the magic?
Magic to me is that
Young Mr. Saxby.
Species. I've got 300 or 400 different species of animals and fish living in close relationship with each other. Symbiotic relationship between the clouds and the anemones. The beauty, the sheer beauty of the different plants growing. Everything has a balance, a relationship.
Still a really impressive tank.
The clouds.
I'd be happy with that today.
And the anemone gives the clouds protection from the other fish eating them. Whenever they're attacked, they swim straight into the anemone. Anybody comes up to them and frightens them, they go straight into the anemone and hide. It's like they want to sit there so that no one can eat it or attack it.
And that was Pete Waterman. So, interestingly, you also go on to say in that one, like about the need for the replenishment of salts. You were talking about calcium, magnesium, alkalinity, and the dripping of the water. And this is going to tie in really well, because when I visited your house a few months ago, you had a new system on a drip, which was doing exactly that, replacing the minerals that are being used up by the corals. So it's quite a good prediction for 34 years, I think.
Yeah, well, it's a full circle.
Yeah.
Over many years, we've all been trying to improve the water that we've got and sustain the missing elements, if we know about it. That's always the case. And I've always used a calcium reactor up to about a year ago.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And you sell calcium reactors? Delta?
Sell calcium, yes. Now, one thing that a calcium reactor does, and so does a nitrate filter, both tools that I use to control the water and get it up and boiling. One problem with that is that it lowers the pH. And pH in my tank has always run at around, in the early days, always run around 8.2, nearly 8.3 with no issues. As I got to stop the tank higher and higher, the pH suffered and dropped down to about, my highest I think is about 1.1, maybe. And of course, there was no way of avoiding this except if you decided to add hydroxide, which I did. The problem with hydroxide, it didn't work 100%, but it also turns everything into cement. It acted like a cement. In the early days you had gravel in the Plenum system, they went rock hard. Rafos, well, when I started using it was when I was using, some time ago, about the fourth person in the world to use Rafos. When I first started using it, that could go hard if you overdid the hydroxide. And therefore you didn't have much of a choice to bring the pH up. I had a large tanks by then, started to get larger tanks. And the problem with the larger tank was the idea of running chemicals reliably with no really good dosing pumps, which always backed up, and no real accuracy with them, that they weren't really an option on a big tank. And only a year or so ago I started to hear about the sediment range of chemicals, and I saw some tanks running on them, and I thought the results were very good. So I phoned up the company and I spoke to this Josie who's here today, and I said to him, you know, I'd like to try and run my changeover, get rid of my calcium reactor, but let's first try and boost this pH with his. He bought out a pH plus, and my pH was 7.9, 8.1 at the highest. Yeah, at the highest. So I tried that. I turned over to it. At first, I didn't get rid of the. I didn't get rid of the calcium reactor. I just slowed it down and down and down until it hardly was working. And the results of putting pH plus on my tank, and the coral flow, and the colours, and the improvements because of the other adjustable chemicals was just night and day. It really was night and day.
Should we see it working? So I've got some video you sent me, David. This is your. I don't know if you guys can see that. So this is your two dosers in your sunroom. Yeah. Can you see that? And they're actually dripping on a 24-hour constant cycle. Yeah. So this is like your 34-year prediction. Yeah. 34 years later, yeah. Here we go. And if you look carefully at the top, you'll just see it dripping, and that's dripping into the pumps.
It's straight to the end of the pump, the suction of the pump. One element, the other one is 3 foot in the water.
And the result of your decades of reef keeping is that now the tank looks like...
Well, the tank has never looked better, more colourful. So it really has.
So this is a view from one side, isn't it? This is your drawing room or study?
Along the side. Yeah, the study.
So this is 10 feet by 4 feet?
Yeah, 10 feet, right.
Shoal of tanks.
6 foot back at the L part of it and then back in. Yeah.
And not too challenging corals, just corals doing really well. Huge sarcophytes, and there's some digis and stylos, and you said to me that the LEDs made a difference at punching down 4 feet. Yeah. So you've got stylo on the bottom of a 4 foot deep tank. I'm just going to show you another one.
That stylo was just an off cut from another stylo. It fell on the ground there. I left it there, I saw it was growing, and then I stuck it on a piece of coral disc, and there it is.
So the display tank, an impressive 10 foot by 6 foot by 5 foot.
Yeah, slightly bigger than 6 foot, but it's 2 metres. If you do it correctly, it's 2 metres 20 by 3 metres 20, 50. The side, the viewing side from there, though slightly narrow because of the glass strips, and then a little cupboard which has a skimmer, and you'll see that later, and that sits as a wall in my house between the opposite, right opposite the pond. I did a deal with my wife. My wife asked me. I've just got married again. She wanted a bigger flat. My flat wasn't large enough, I was going to live elsewhere. So I said I would buy a bigger flat if I could have a bigger aquarium, because I thought the two would go hand in hand. She agreed to that, and I put the tank in before, I bought the flat, but I put the tank in before she could see the bigger flat, because the wall...
We've all done that, David.
And when she saw the tank, she nearly had it fit. She said that she had agreed a bigger tank, but that wasn't a bigger tank, that was a monster of a tank, and that's not what she really agreed to. I said, wait, it'll look all right, I promise you. Once we open up the other side of it, and you'll see the walls come down, you'll find that it fits in with the scheme very nicely. And she said, I could never see that working, that's not right, that's not fair. And I said, well, let's wait and see. And we wait and saw, and she was happy, she liked it after all that.
So 12,000 litres total volume, rebuilt in 2013, re-aquascaped in 2015. So although to me that tank's been there a long time, it's actually a newly built tank, or was newly built in 2013.
Yeah, there was a tank there. Well, it's not dissimilar in the footprint of that one.
Yeah.
But this one is it was a complete new construction, and things that I knew were wrong on the old one, I tried to change on the new one. As a matter of interest, there are no bracing bars going across, just wires, which closed loop system. I don't, you're rushing through the pictures. Can we get one?
Do you want one at the top? I've got them all. We can look at them.
Well, that one's pretty good. Gives you an idea. You can see the door post there. There's doors on the edge of the tank. You can see the closed loops at the bottom of the tank.
I'll show you now.
Yeah, that's a top view. They're the stress wires. They're wires.
Across there.
Yes.
These are steel bars, aren't they?
Because I couldn't put a steel frame around it on the outside, because I have very thin glass on the corners going, which acts as a frame with a padlock, the rest of the doors. So there was no way of making that look nice. Now you can see all the closed loop pipes. They go underneath the tank into the sump down there. There are pumps running them, and that's how they go over the weir on suction.
Now that's a lot of pipe work. This design looks complicated, but it probably is, isn't it? It's way more pipe work than we would have on a normal aquarium.
But the flow in the tank, the flow is really important. I have no motors in the tank. If a motor goes wrong, I just undo it outside the tank. And I've got no holes going through the bottom of the tank. And that's very important, because that's dangerous. And not only is that dangerous, but there's always a problem with the ball valves after 5 or 6 years. They're not ball valves that get closed and open very often, and because they don't get closed and open very often, they start leaking because calcium does it. So all sorts of reasons why you don't have holes in the bottom of the tank. The flow is forced in the tank, because all the suction's behind like a weir, but a weir that's open at the bottom and the top, with guards over the suction pipes, and you can take them out and clean them. So the water is sucked to one point in the tank, where it's then taken through the pumps, and there are 20,000 litre pumps on wave, and the pumps are all wavy all the time. There are 12 or 13 pumps on the system. My sunroom, which I built, is under the road in an original coal bunker for the building, because it's a very old building, and it's 30 metres away. It is 30. And the height of it is exactly the same nearly as the tank. So I have to pump the water backwards and forwards and make sure that all pumps and everything work, so that it isn't balanced. It becomes balanced because when one gets too fast, it slows down the motor now, and the other one catches up again. So there was a lot of early issues with that, with the float switches and everything working properly, but today that runs 24/7, and we don't have floods. I had one tank break on me, the one before this, where unfortunately the big pane went, and my feet were in water in the kitchen, from the water that came out the tank, and it was just as it was starting. So, but those type of things teach you. Constructing large tanks is a very, very difficult and very costly affair, especially if they go in. It's very, very important.
You had to put in an insurance claim, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, it was insured, and they went after the tank for it. And that's where it goes up.
Don't build a tank for David Saxby. If it bursts,
nothing to do with it.
if it bursts, they're going to chase you. Okay, should we see it being put together in all schematic? So it's a steel stand, I take it?
Galvanised.
Galvanised steel.
Yeah.
So what are the sumps underneath then? Because you pump out of those sumps over the rotor.
Yes, yeah, the water goes back over the ceiling, up and over the ceiling. The water comes in from the sump to the sump underneath.
That's a lot of pipe work, isn't it, with all the closed loops? You obviously explained why you did it, but that's a big plumbing job.
Well, we for a good plumber myself, and none other.
Yeah.
It's not as such a thing.
You're not put off.
I use a lot of flexible pipe.
Is that flexible? Because it looks it is. It's not elbows and straight.
No, it's flexible.
Okay.
Those curves underneath are flexible.
Right. Excellent. I'm coming off it. So the sunroom, as you said, is 100 feet away.
Yeah.
And you have to, this isn't by gravity, this isn't the tank overflowing into a weir, the weir sending down a drain. You have to pump it.
I have to pump it, and I have to pump it backwards and forwards.
That's a nightmare, potentially.
Well, it isn't, because the problem's solved. So it works.
With float switches?
So it's in the early, yes, but with very good float switches, not your aquarium one on the magnet. We haven't got that type of float switch. We have a Magnesium. But the float switches themselves are very, very good. And they last a very long time.
So this room's quite large on its own. It's probably, what, 12 feet square, something like that?
It's 3 metres, something long. And back to front is 2 metres 70.
And all this equipment in there, we can see, perhaps you can talk us through it. We've got a skimmer, we've got
nitrate reactor, one design that's got on vodka right at the moment, so I can change that. Those are the used elements, part 1 and part 2.
And what volume are they, those containers?
They're 100 litres each, those.
100 litres of volume?
Yes.
Each? So that's 400 litres?
But that's because I don't like money now. I've got a couple of slaves, no. No, I clean the glass with a magnet, like you do, on yours, and it's just a bigger one, that's all.
It's one of yours, isn't it?
Yeah, well, no, I don't use ours, because ours doesn't go. That glass is 25 and we've got it 20. Okay. But it's a twinsy magnet, but I put a blade on it, and now they put a blade on it, so they copied it. But twinsy magnets were about the only strong enough. Now
Saw just a bit more of your tank and got to meet the man himself, so thank you very much. Any questions?
yes.
The depth of 1.2, 1.4 metres.
No, 4 foot, which is about just 4 foot. Well, actually higher than that because they're that much off the surface.
The next question was, what sort of height do you maintain your lights at to get the tar reading, to get to the drogue holes at the bottom?
They're about 14 inches above the water line. Yeah. But I've got them 3 foot in the sunroom above the water, with no issues growing corals underneath them.
And what depth of water?
The depth is 35. But, you know, they're here and the tank's on the floor.
Is that down to maybe the multiples of lights overlapping?
I don't know. I don't know why. I have never understood why. The small, the lights.
The Hydra 26.
Why about the heating? What about the amount of heating? And you have to replace a bulb that costs about, well, on 80D, you'll use a 250. A 250 is about 55, 60 pounds a day. You have to do that every year. No way. You can't get the colours. I mean,
throwing the ball up in the air.
there's no way back on that, in my view. And the beauty at night is not the daylight colour of the bulb. The beauty is the actinic type colours that you see on the corals.
Just about the KH keeper really, you're taking it offline and you're dosing the pH plus 2-part. I understand it drops your pH, but was that the only reason why you took the KH keeper off?
Say that again.
The calcium reactor. You
Yes.
took it offline for a 2-part dose.
Yes.
Is pH loss the only reason, or?
Well, too much pH loss is an absolute reason why I took it off, because the pH loss is too great and it's not good. But I've also found it much more accurate to keep my water stable, than the calcium reactor, and a lot less work, by the way, and less water changes because it's more accurate. I mean, keeping that calcium reactor running is a nightmare in the use of CO2, media that's never the same, extra phosphate, which you get from it. You can't avoid some phosphate from the calcium reactor. And I think that is so controllable. It's just another world. I could never get near it. And I had a lot of water. And you get a swing in the water in my tank, you really need to do something.
Okay, once again, thank you very much. Thanks for coming.